In an active war zone, there is little time to remorse. You are focused on the job. You're focused on defending your homeland or helping the people around you. But today, because I have this channel and I'm not in a war zone, I'm gonna take the time to remorse a little bit and talk about some of the friends who have fell. You know, I get asked a lot, surprisingly, have I ever killed anybody? This is a question a lot of veterans get, and it's a touchy subject. Because for me, the short answer is no. But the long answer is yes. I always imagined that the first time I would kill somebody would be looking down the sights of my rifle, down the barrel of my gun, and firing at an enemy. But it wasn't like that. And by the end of this video, you'll understand what I mean by that, either because they were friends who died under my watch, friends who died because I wasn't there, or friends that died because of my ignorance to their pain and trauma. These were my friends, not enemies. Sometimes these were just guys passing by, other times it was just a conversation or two that I had with them, but all of them were my brothers, every single one. So I'm not naive or arrogant enough to think that I am the reason that these people fell, but they were all the same to me. And if there's one thing I know, and you know, it's that people die when their legacy isn't told anymore, when people don't know their names. So today, if you give me your time, you'll know their names. We're gonna start from the top in the Marine Corps. Denny Tran, I've worn you on my wrist for the last 7 years. You were as short as me, but had a stronger heart to keep up with the hikes, which everybody applauded you for. You would help me when I needed help as a male orderly when I was in the Marines, so for a company where we're passing around mail, you would help me all the time. And although I didn't know you well, definitely couldn't call you a friend, you were a brother. And anyone who knew you knows that the day that you died, we lost a very, very rare type of person in this world. Somebody who's kind, generous, has a big heart, and inspirational. So in the Marine Corps, we didn't have too many deaths when I was in. We had a couple afterwards because of trauma and PTSD, but we're gonna move into the YPG now with Hiwa. Hiwa, you were the first person I ever saw who died in a traumatic way, unfortunately. And I'm not gonna go into details, but it was a gunshot wound on my guard duty. You were an older man who left a comfortable life back home, a great job, a family, all that was given up so you could help the revolution in Rojava and defend against ISIS. You had no business being there. You had no military experience. You had a family back home. You had a great job back home. You had everything you needed. But you felt it in your heart that you couldn't just stay home and watch young people go and fight against ISIS and die. You wanted to be there yourself. You spent your entire 6 months in Rojava at the military academy that we had, and you did everything that you could over there. You trained us in medical, military. You were just a father figure to us because you were so old. You led PT as well, and also just by being a mentor to those of us who didn't know how to cook, didn't know how to go and do our chores, like sweeping, which, believe it or not, there's quite a few. And yeah, you just helped us just by being a father figure. So you're missed by a lot of people. You still are, and I think about you quite a bit. Lorenzo Orsetti. I met you very briefly when you stopped by the military academy after an operation, and you just went straight back into the front. When you left that day is when I learned more about you, how you had been in the YPG for years, fighting and bleeding for the revolution against ISIS. When you passed away in the front line of Baghouz, 3 days before the end of the ISIS caliphate in Rojava. Just 3 days. After spending years there, I felt so guilty for not being there with you and your comrades, but I doubt I could have changed the outcome given your experience, expertise, and morale. You're missed by many, and you rest in power now. Rashid. Where do I even start? I tried my best about a month back to go and make a video about you, but there's so much more that people don't know about you. Anybody who met you couldn't help but have their ego and pride fade away in the face of your humility. You'd spent 5-6 years in the YPG, and you spent it all learning the Kurdish language, dedicating your life, never talking about yourself as, ooh, I'm Mr. American. You were there to go and help. I made a video about you trying to show how much you meant to me and everybody around you. Like Lorenzo, you spent years in Rojava fighting ISIS and defending positions in Afrin against the Turkish Air Force, in Tal Tamr, and all the way down to Baghouz near the end of the ISIS caliphate. You were a chill dude, mentally scarred by the things you'd seen though, but you always tried to hide your pain despite the nightmares. Anytime we needed advice or somebody to talk to, you were always there and ready to talk. Your humor was hilarious, your laugh contagious. Your very being was pure. You were pure. Younger than me as well. The time that jet passed by when I was on guard duty and I yelled for you to get off the roof, and yet you were staying on the roof because you didn't want people to hear you cry when you were having your nightmares. And also so you could look up at the stars at night like you did on countless military operations, sleeping on rooftops. So as soon as I called you down, you jumped off the rooftop, came to me and said, "Thank you. Thanks for not forgetting me." How could I forget you, man? You were on our mind all the time. You were the best dude in the entire unit. I could have never forgotten you. That time I lent you my phone when you wanted to talk to your parents, and you thanked me as if I'd say no. As if I wouldn't have let you use it. Like, of course. You don't need to say thank you, man. You're my brother. You hadn't seen them in years. You were my inspiration to go to the YBS after the YPG. You were the inspiration for me to better my character, and you continue to be my role model to this day. Anytime that I was in war, especially Ukraine, I would look for people who had that same look in their eyes as you did. That way I would know if I could trust them or not. It was a look in your eyes. It was pure. It was pure, and it was knowing, and it was humility. There was something in your eyes, man. So I looked them in the eyes just so I could gauge if I could trust them or not in war. It's a big deal. You were killed by your nightmares, and you are missed by every single person who has ever met you. Now we're gonna move into the YBS. Very similar group with the Kurds, but this time in Iraq. Fedekar. Yeah. The night that I learned that you had fell was the night that I was sleeping in a bomb shelter before my last mission in Ukraine. I heard that you were killed in a drone strike on combat operations in northern Iraq, so I barely got sleep in that bomb shelter that night because I was thinking of you. But when I woke up, when I finally got 2 hours of sleep, I woke up and they asked if I wanted to be point man. I jumped at the opportunity because I knew Fedekar did the same. He was somebody who led by example. I'm gonna do my best. All I had to do was remember your sacrifice and how you didn't have to be in the cold mountains defending positions against a much larger military than yours. You were a Kurd who lived by the rules, no matter if anybody would find out or not. You spent your first 8 months in the YBS as a tunnel digger, which is a tough job. And it was proven by the scars that you had in your arms as well as your muscle-bound forearms. You then became a soldier, but when us internationals had a hard time digging tunnels, you would come by, I would watch you, a kilometer away, downhill, you would walk up to our base every single morning for a month and help us dig tunnels, just because you had the experience and you want to help us out. And as soon as we reached the surface and we were digging out the area to go and put the Dushka tripod, I remember how you would bring us inside whenever you heard a drone, never settling for complacency. You always looked out for our safety. You always tried to make sure that we were going to survive our time in YBS. And you would help us with the tunnel digging with a big smile on your face. And every time we had a break, some of us would bring out the shisha, maybe we would make some jokes and stuff, but you were a man of your word. You knew what you were in the revolution to do, and you never let go of your morality. You always kept the same morals, you never changed, and it's something that I look back at and I realized just how special of a person you were. Yeah, you were somebody who never failed to follow what your morals said. You were a big brother that nobody deserved, but everybody wanted. You were a quiet man, but just as dedicated as the men next to you. You were forever missed of all. Shahid.
Very good.
Darav, not gonna lie, you already know this. We did not like you in the international unit. You were our commander, and any commander will know the same. The soldiers don't really enjoy your presence. But at the same time, you deserved to be in a commander spot and sort of take it chill. You'd spent countless years in the YBS and other groups, fighting against ISIS, resisting against the Turkish military. You deserve rest. You were a commander with a giant role of instilling discipline and respect to leadership. So when I learned that you were killed in a drone strike, I was honestly heartbroken. I remember that night on guard duty when Bahus was coming down the mountain and there was a drone chasing him. So I ran over to him as he entered your house. And I was like, hey, guys, split up. There's a drone. You can hear it. And without a doubt in your mind, you took both of us and you said, run from my place. Because you didn't want us to get killed in the crossfire. You knew that they were looking for you. And you knew that if we were there with you, maybe they'd strike, maybe they didn't. But you didn't want any trouble. You didn't want us to die with you. So you sent us away as fast as you can. You were looking out for us, no matter how much we despised you when you were over for chai and you were kind of an asshole. You were looking out for us. You were a commander. You earned your place there. And you did the best job that you could. So for that, I thank you. I think everybody that remembers you would say, hey, he was a commander, he took his job seriously, and part of that job is disciplining us, but he spent his time in the organization. He deserved a little bit of rest, a little bit more of a leadership role, and you're missed of all. You're missed of all. I think about you quite a bit. Cecilia, I met you for like 2 days when I was in the YBS. You swung by right when I was in Shengal, after you had just gotten done by being in Rojava for a couple months. You were a much-needed bright spirit for those few days, and you made friends with everybody you met around the world. You've been all over the world. I remember that although you were a woman, you had more balls than us because you actually confronted the people who were lying about their operations, their operational experience that were in our unit. It was a small thing, but you didn't shy away from confronting liars. I also remember when you showed me the videos of FBR, Freedom Rangers, and I was recording from my phone to your phone, because I was so excited that you had met FBR and you had a great experience with them. You knew them very well. And I was stoked that you met them in Tal Tamr. Unfortunately, the last time that I heard of you was when you passed away in Ukraine about a year ago. Plenty of the friends in my little friend circle have met you before, and everybody says the same thing. You were a very warm spirit. You wanted to help out as much as possible. And you were actually one of the few war reporters that actually did a really good job. You went to the frontline areas. You took part in operations. You did your job more than enough. So we'll miss you. Curtis Cudi. I couldn't even remember if I had met you until I was told the stories about you, and I remembered you when you were killed by the drone strike that happened right outside the entrance to our cave. You were a chauffeur for the commander, and despite the relaxed job that is, you still found time to train and better yourself for the next operation or whatever happens. You took your job seriously despite it being a chauffeur. The only memory that I have of you is that you fired our PCAM off the kitchen table, which is kind of hilarious, and then we had to clean it for you afterwards. But yeah, it was fun. You enjoyed yourself, but when you were at the international base, you wanted to go and show us, like, hey, I know about the PCAM, like, here's me firing it, and yeah, you wanted to go and make friends with us, and you did that day. You were fun, you liked shooting, and had I gotten to know you better, it would all be the same. You were like any brother that I've met, whether it's in the USA, Ukraine, Iraq, Syria, and I really wish that I could have known you a little bit better. Really do. But as we say out there, Shehi Namrin, martyrs never die. We will always remember you, and we remember your sacrifice as well. Hospital personnel. There's quite a few of you. Before I met Cecilia for the first time, I had a really bad flu. So I went to the hospital and you guys were helping me out. The head nurse was a veterinarian. He still is, he's alive. But he answered the call to help people in this inhospitable area. The hospital staff had a warm and welcoming attitude like any hospital I've ever been to in the world, despite the conditions there. And they helped me recover from this really terrible flu. After the first visit, I would then go and meet Cecilia, so it happened about the same time. I didn't know you all well, but you did your job of helping people to the bitter end, in the face of trauma patients from a drone strike. And knowing that the end was near, you knew that the Turkish military was going to do a double tap and destroy your hospital. You didn't care though. You had a trauma patient and you needed help. And although I tried my best on my channel to make a dedicated video about that incident, to go and bring light to it and make sure that your memory has a lasting impact on the Turkish Air Force who killed you, I know that there's nothing that can actually bring you back. You were angels in Şengöl, and you were surely angels watching over Şengöl as we speak. Thank you for your job. Suresh. Where do I even begin? You spent years in Şengöl, you took a break about a year in, and then returned when you heard that your good friend was killed a month after you came home. You were the silent type, serious, a good sense of humor though, and by far the best team leader out of the bunch, including myself. You were the best. We all agree. Out of the two teams that the internationals had, you were one of the team leaders and I took over for my team leader when he left, and both of us agreed that you were the better team leader. You always were. You had spent so many years in Şengöl, you valued hard work, and you never fell into a bad mood despite how many years you had spent in Şengöl. You took it all in stride, you were a super chill guy, and to this day, I have never met somebody like you. You were the type of dude, and this is, I don't even think this is a type of dude, but you were the kind of guy who would smoke 3 cigarettes a day, at max. But usually it was just one after you get done with a work day, just to give yourself a treat. Like seriously, how do you even have the discipline to do that? I don't know, because I smoked like a pack a day when I was out there. I was here in Vietnam when I heard that you fell with my friend Ethan. The stories I've heard from people who served with you in Ukraine coincide with who I knew you as. On your off time from operations, you would diligently study Ukrainian. You took any free time that you had to develop yourself into the cultures you joined. And you were the reason that I learned Kurdish in Şengöl. When we were meeting up with the Kurds in the cave in the first week, and you were speaking fluently with them, I was like, whoa. And I wanted to be a team leader as well. So you pushed me to be a better team leader, a better person, somebody who could adapt myself into the culture. You were that guy. I spent a year with you, and I cherish that year above all the rest of my years in my life. Partly due to knowing and serving with you, the healthy competition that we had as team leaders was incredibly useful in keeping morale and defending our base. Your work ethic and a serious reason to be in Şengöl made the time go by fast. You will forever be remembered, and our stories with you told to our loved ones. You left a tangible impact on every conflict that you were in. You will forever be in our mind as we try and replicate just a little bit of your work ethic. Thank you, Shehi Namrin.
Yo, Rudy, I heard about that you break with Chick, the one that you was with. Just saying you that I know that, can be hard, but man, better, Now you can be able to focus in other things. Also, Ethan sent you his regards.
Ethan, your passing away to this day impacts me a lot. It does. It's difficult for anybody who knew you. You and I would text over Instagram since you were an early subscriber of my channel, way back in the day. Our friendship then developed into a brotherhood as you joined the Marines when you turned 18. You also wanted to help the Kurds really badly, but then the most recent war in Ukraine started and you jumped at the chance to help. You wanted to put your training into action and actually help people. And during that first visit to Ukraine, you were extracting civilians from hot war zones. War zones that were still taking artillery blasts. You would go in there and take the civilians out. Incredible for such a young man like you. You then left to Poland so you could get some combat medical courses so you could return better prepared on your second time. You didn't pretend to know everything from your time in the Marine Corps. You went afterwards to EMT classes, combat medical courses, to make sure that you knew what you were talking about when you were instructing students. You did that for yourself. You did that for them. You were much more humble than I was when I was your age. And then when you returned back to Ukraine, you joined TDI with me as an instructor, and we instructed for a couple months. Great time. You learned everything you could about the AK system, even though you had never held one in your life. You took that AK, you would practice reloads, you would practice absolutely everything. So that way when you got to the range, you were better at reloads than me. You were better at shooting than me. And I held that AK for many, many years. You did that for yourself and you did that for others to go and prove that putting in the effort pays off. It's just incredible. It was clear to everybody around you that you knew your stuff. You were self-taught, but it was so cool. I remember that night when you left to join the combat unit, you invited me over to say goodbye. So I ran over despite the curfew to say goodbye. We talked for about an hour, and I still remember that night when you were walking away, one direction, I was going the other. You disappeared into the shadows, and then I heard you yell my name out. So I turn around, I say, "What's up?" You're like, "I love you, man. Thank you. I'm doing this for you." I'm like, you've already made us proud, dude. You don't need to do that. But you did. You knew, every instructor knew that you were going to go to the front line. Even you knew. You knew your fate. You knew your fate as well. It was something. You knew that you're going to be going to the hottest war zone. You knew what you were on this planet for. That's what I'm trying to say. Despite your short life, you have impacted everybody around you, especially in Ukraine. Like, oh my God, dude. The legacy that you put on, all the students, they're texting me now saying, "Rest in peace, Ethan." Like, God, he was a good instructor. You knew that you had done enough by training students, but you didn't want the students to go alone. You want to be with them. So you went out there. You joined a combat unit, and you fell with my friend Suresh about 2 months ago. And the word is that you and him, under intense Russian fire, you ran to a Ukrainian position that was being fired on. You helped them until you were killed in a last stand scenario with my friend Suresh. There's no other person that I would want Suresh to be with than you during those moments. There's nobody else. And that's what I'm holding on to. If you were still in the Marine Corps, you would have undoubtedly got one of the highest awards for courage. Same with Suresh. Much more courageous than myself. You fell as a hero, and your legacy will never be forgotten. You died doing what you loved, defending Ukrainian people. There's so much more I wish I could say, though. How for years I would call you, and you would call me, and anytime we called, it would be for like 3 hours. And we talk about some really deep stuff. We have very similar backgrounds. We have very, very similar mindsets in life, perspectives on life and the world. And we went down a very similar path. I'm just so proud of you, man. Really proud of you. Everybody's proud of you. You did more than enough. You gave everything for a country that you weren't born in. So I'll miss our talks, but I will not miss you, because you're forever in me, and you will never be forgotten. Heroam Slava. Shepard. The first time I met you was in Kiev in early March when it was nearly surrounded. You and I were both there to go and join the fight, and the moment I met you, I felt a lot safer in Kiev. You were tall, muscular, handsome. You were a model back in the day, successful. You had a son. You were like the perfect soldier. You had military experience as well in the United States Army. Beyond that, you were friendly. You were hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And on your free time, you learned Ukrainian, unlike myself. You were also the funniest guy in the unit. When I left Kiev and went to Mykolaiv, I thought I would never see you again. The next month, when I changed units, you were there to pick me up from Kharkiv, which is crazy. Small world. I instantly felt reassured that you were in the unit. Over the next 3 months, you would go on countless missions. You befriended the commanders. During your first trip in Ukraine alone, 2 of my close friends would call you their best friend. They loved you. You were fearless in combat, and you were fearless in society, always lifting our spirits by cracking jokes and being your outgoing self. You also loved your son to death. I remember at our first base, you had your bed, and you had your son's stuffed animal always next to your pillow. You always kept it with you. You always talked about your son. You never, despite how successful you were in life, being a model, you were a military veteran, you did all these things, you never talked about those things. You always talked about your son. You had humility, which is insane to think about. A person like you having humility. If I was like you, God. When I left Ukraine after that first visit, you were the first one to call me and let me know that the rest of our team were wounded badly in and that they're in the hospital. You were the first one. You cared so much about them, and you cared about me that, that even though I wasn't there, you wanted me to know. And because I found out what happened, I was able to use the donations from my channel and give it to them, some of my revenue, because you were the one, you helped them. Because I didn't even know. I wouldn't have learned until they were out of the hospital. You took part in a lot of operations after that and then came home. And when I found out that you were starting real estate back home, I donated to you with my YouTube revenue because I was proud that you were trying to reintegrate into society. No matter how much that we probably agree it's pretty difficult, you were trying. And I wanted to help you with that. But you and everybody else knew that your calling was to fight. You knew your fate. Like a lot of the people that I'm talking about today, they all knew their fate. They knew what they were asking for. They knew the end result, which was them falling. But they continued. They're special people. There's angels in this world. There really are. So despite being a great father, a loving son, a best friend to many around you, a model and a veteran, you chose to return to Ukraine, and you fell on the front lines. There's nothing that can bring you back to this earth, but I assure you, everybody who knows you, anybody who knew you, has you living in their mind for the better for the rest of their life. We will remember you. We will tell your legacy. We will tell your story, and I know how lucky I am. And I know that no matter how much I go through, no matter how much success I find, there will always be a greater good. You can't dodge fate, and there's just no way we can forget you. You were everything to a lot of people, and your legacy continues. Rest in peace. Chief, like Shepard, you were also a Native American, a very proud one at that, thus the name Chief. You were a big, friendly, older dude that many of us viewed as a dad. I didn't see you after Kiev until about a year later when I returned to Ukraine for the second time, but you were always there. You bought a house, you had a wife, and you did your best to join a combat unit despite your illnesses. Throughout this year, you had befriended many of my friends, and I learned why. When I came back, you forcibly invited me to go and come over for a home-cooked meal from your wife and you, some drinks, and to even spend the night for a day or two, which I couldn't. We had to leave that day, but God, man, just so friendly, always friendly, always inviting us over. You were just a good human to be around. You were never in a sour mood, and I really appreciate that. You left a good impact on me and everybody around you. You died a couple months back, but we all still think of you, and we all miss you, Chief. Thanks for what you did for us. Nechir. I could barely call you a friend, but we were friends when we needed each other. That same look that I saw in Rashid's eye, I saw in you. And that way I knew I trusted you. And it was for good measure. Yeah, I traveled to Kiev with you when I was surrounded. We went down to Mykolaiv, and after my first mission, when I came back, I jumped off the truck, and everybody was asking, what happened? We were clearly shell-shocked. You took me aside, handed me a cigarette, you got your hand on my shoulder, you looked me in the eyes, the same look that I always saw, and you brought me behind the building, lit up my cigarette and said, don't think about it too much. Don't think about it. What's done is done. And I really appreciate that. I heard a lot about you before I was actually able to meet you in Poland. So in Poland, when we were at the hostel and you were staging your gear on the ground, making sure everything's accounted for, and I was talking to you, I got to realize why people mention you a lot. You are an incredible person. You've been in every war zone in the world. You're even a Yazidi, which I just came from Iraq to Ukraine. I was with the Yazidis, and you were one of them. You'd spend time in the Shangal Mountains. You'd spend time in the YPG. The stories of when you were in Sarikania, you were surrounded by jihadists from the north, Turkish-backed jihadists, surrounded. And you took a tank blast, shrapnel everywhere, and you survived. But you stayed there until they called the evacuation. You didn't run away. In Shangal, you were very close to Cecilia as well, and you knew everybody that I knew. So it was just a matter of time before we met, and I thank God that I was able to meet you and travel with you. Really, really good time. You were a best friend to many of my friends, including Shepard. You guys were close. You guys had been through it. You went on a lot of operations with them, one of which I would learn about when I returned to Ukraine for the second time, and I was talking to you in a bar where a Russian tank drove 10 meters away from your trench, you and Shepard. You guys stayed low and you survived. Insane. You were probably the most seasoned veteran I've ever met. Before I returned to my second trip to Ukraine, I reached out to you, in particular, asking, if you need anything, you let me know right now. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to bring it to you. Because I know how much you like your gear. I know how much that you're doing operations. I want to help you. Because I know that if I invest in you, I'm going to invest in the safety of Ukraine. So you named a couple of things, and I got it to you. And when we went to that bar and you were telling me the stories, and I was with all my other friends that I was able to get some stuff for using the YouTube revenue. I think back of the day a lot, even though it was so long ago. I didn't want the last time I see you to be after my first mission. I really, really appreciated your presence. Had I only been half the man you were, maybe I could have gone on operations with you and seen you at your most comfortable. You know when people say that 90% of the people in war shouldn't even be there, 9% are soldiers and 1% is a warrior? 1% right there. Nechir. You're missed, dude. You're missed. And the last guy I'm going to mention that I also know from Ukraine is Pezz. He was one of the older dudes who joined our unit. He came with Nechir, me, and the others when we arrived in Poland and traveled in to Ukraine. We trained the territorial defense together. We didn't do any missions together because I only stayed in that unit for a little bit. And again, he was one of the guys I donated to because I want to help him as he was traveling back home to go and see his son. There's a lot of people who really cared about him, a lot of people who have good memories with him, including myself. I remember when we were in, I think, Lviv, we were training territorial defense at the beginning of the war. We wanted to leave. And he guided us. He made sure, okay, let's all stick together. We're gonna come here. And he was a blunt guy from the UK. Not everybody's cup of tea, but he was a good dude. He fought till the end. And he did the best he could at the age that he was as well. I guess what I want to say to wrap things up is that the thing is, I think about these guys a lot. Some more than others, but at the end of the day, when I think of them, I try and replicate them. You don't remember the bad parts of people when they die. You remember the good parts. And there's a lot of good in people, and it's unfortunate that you usually only see the good in people when they pass away. That's when you start looking at the things that you were missing out on, the good attributes. And that's what I'm digesting right now. And I'm remembering who these people were, what they meant to me, what they meant to the people around them, and how much they gave up. I'm a different person than you, you're a different person than them, but we're all in this together. We all try our best. So these are my experiences with them. Think what you will of that. I wanted to spend this video talking about that. Now, this video is not going to be monetized, obviously. Any donations that I get for this are going to be donated to family members of people that I mentioned here. I've donated quite a bit to their families, some of them, when I can find a contact, just so you guys know. That's where a lot of the donations have went. I just wanted you guys to know a little bit more about these guys that I served with. And hopefully you understand now, you know, when veterans are asked if they killed anybody, there's not always an easy answer. You know what I mean? That's about it, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Remember their names. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.